Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to lecture number 8 of the Climate College. My name is Amber Paris. I'm the Climate Change Advisor for the department, and it's a pleasure to be at lecture number 8. Who would have thought we would be at lecture number 8 so quickly? But I'm really excited. So we're happy to have you all here. We have a great talk, 2 talks today on the department's sustainability initiatives. And before we go over to those folks, I do have one announcement. We have set the date, so please save the date for June 25th from 1 to 3 for our Climate College Awards ceremony. It will be here in the auditorium, but we are going to WebEx it because we know that there are folks who might not be able to travel up to Sacramento, but we are planning a very fun, engaging, dynamic awards ceremony to really celebrate all of you who have taken part in this course. Just to remind you that if you watch 7 of the 9 lectures and do a project, you are going to get training credit from OTD on your record for Fish and Wildlife staff, and also a certificate of completion from our director. So we really hope you guys can attend that and celebrate with all of us. And then one of the most important parts of that ceremony is to showcase the projects that our staff and partners are doing. And I put up just kind of a little list to give you some ideas. We have, I think, right now 26 confirmed projects, and I know there are more because you guys are still calling me and talking to me about them. So we're really excited to share those projects and, again, to celebrate all of you who have worked on them. And not only is it our Fish and Wildlife staff in the department that are doing projects, but also our partners who have been taking the course with us. And at the very bottom, there's a project called the Upland Water-Wise Food Garden, and I just wanted to kind of call out one of our partners he's a retired military. He's very passionate about climate change, and he's working in his community using this upland or using this water-wise garden to reach out to his neighbors and the rest of his community about climate change. So there's really exciting projects. We're really excited to really showcase the work that's happening in the department, the thinking that's going on, and building this community. I think one of the most important parts of this whole Climate College for me has been that focus on building a community within the department. And you know, there's more and more times that I'm getting phone calls and emails and hearing about these great projects that are happening, and I wanted to share a little bit about some of the staff highlights from our regions. And this is kind of a preface, both to hearing from 2 of our department staff today, and then in our next lecture we have testimonials from staff. But I think that these are really good reminders of how people are coming together in the department around climate change, how we're working with our partners, and how we're working together to build a community. So one that I wanted to point out is that our Marine region has their own climate working group. They get together once a month to talk about the things that they're working on, to share ideas, to talk about activities, and also to sort of divvy up work to review documents. But they're coming together around climate change on a regular basis. So that's exciting to see that. We have another one of these work groups in Region 1, but I think these things are probably happening more out in the regions. I'm just not hearing about them. The other one is that we do have a staff member also in our Marine region, Doug Nielsen, who's been sort of this hidden gem in our department. I just recently found out that he's actually a trained climate scientist and working with folks out at Scripps prior to coming to the department, and also now he continues to work with some of those modelers around downscaled models. So here we have this incredible resource that we didn't know about. So we've been really fortunate that the Marine region have given Doug time to work with us on this Wildlife Action Plan revision. He's helping us with our Marine Vulnerability Assessment, but he's also a really good resource for all of you. So this whole idea about how we build a community, we figure out the different roles and expertise we bring together, and I think it's important to have that network to rely on as we work in the department. And then the last one was just a project I just found out about very recently out at Elkhorn Slough. Really excited. They have this unique partnership with NOAA in the department, and the Elkhorn Slough is actually a national estuarine research reserve, but they are actually doing climate research and monitoring, and they have these long-term data sets they've been doing monitoring, and they've actually been rethinking them to ask them different questions so that they can start to understand the impacts of sea level rise, ocean acidification. So they are really sort of walking the talk and thinking about how they integrate climate change into their work. They also have some specific adaptation projects, again, around oyster restoration, interesting work around the wetland, upland ecotone, and tidal restoration. So I just put that little plug because I don't think that Elkhorn Slough is sort of in isolation. I think there's a lot of these examples, and so much a part of what we're doing in the department around climate change is really going to come down to how we communicate with each other and let each other know how we can support each other and bring new ideas forth as we work on climate change. So again, that sort of tees up our next lecture next week will be Walking the Talk, testimonials from within our department, and we have Kevin Hunting, our Chief Deputy Director, who will be speaking, Gordon Lepig from Region 1, our Law Enforcement Division Chief, Mike Carrion, and Debbie Asseltine-Nielsen from the Marine Region. So you're going to get some different perspectives of how people in the department are thinking about it. Again, putting this personal face on it and really trying to build that community internally. So with that, it's a pleasure to introduce Kevin Hunting, our Chief Deputy Director, to introduce our two speakers for today.
Thanks, Amber. Appreciate it. Looks like I'm doing a talk on the next one, which is good. No, you didn't. Always a pleasure to do the introduction for our speakers and lecturers for this series. Before I introduce Crilly and Whitney today, though, I was at the National Adaptation Forum, Amber's National Adaptation Forum, the inaugural event in Denver last week, which is it was a pretty remarkable crowd there. From I think we had 42 states, 43 states, something like that. Most of the federal agencies, and I think upwards of 500 people there. And our climate college was a topic among many other states. It's something that got a lot of attention nationwide, and it's kind of really viewed as a model for how they can do internal communications on climate change and do some training for their staff. So hats off to you, Amber and Whitney, for pulling this off. It's turned out really well. It's hard to believe it is this far along. I'm impressed that we have 26 projects. That's great. I can't wait to hear more about them. So today, our staff, Green Team member Crilly Butler, he's a Senior Information Systems Analyst with us. He's he's the guy that I go to and say, Crilly, do you think we could? And he goes, oh, yeah, we can do that. Just tell me what it is, which is nice. So there's a long list of things he's working on and has done web design, usability and architecture, and he's leveraged his past training in interpersonal communication to build bridges. I'd say that's true in our department for sure, connecting the right people. One interesting note here that I didn't know until today. Previous software project he led was accepted in Smithsonian's Permanent Research Collection in 2000, so hope you say a word about that. I'd like to hear a little bit about it. And then Whitney Albright, she's been with us for a couple of years. Her and Amber are our core climate change program. She's done a remarkable job for us in the short time that she's been here. She serves as a liaison between the department and the 4 landscape conservation cooperatives in California. Really most of it the California LCC, but really all the LCCs. She was a research scientist at the University of Washington, studying the effects of climate change on natural systems in the Pacific Northwest before coming to work with us. So with that, welcome Crilly and Whitney.
Hello, thank you. All right, so I'm Whitney Albright, and I'm going to be talking to you about CDFW's Going Green initiative. But first, what do I mean by Going Green? Well, what I'm planning to talk to you about today are some of the department's activities to really make our day-to-day operations more sustainable. So I'm talking about ways that we're increasing energy efficiency, reducing water use, generally things that are helping us to reduce our carbon footprint at the department. And almost everything that I'm planning to talk about today, you can find more information on our Going Green website. So if you haven't had a chance to visit it yet, I encourage you to do so. It's got a lot of great resources on there if you want to dig a little bit deeper. This is what I'm planning to cover today. I want to talk about the inception of the Going Green initiative, how it got started, where we are now, where we're going. I'll talk about the DFW Bikes Committee. And then I'll spend the second half of the presentation talking about what we're actually doing at the department, some of our sustainability activities department-wide, and also some things that individual staff are doing in their offices. So the Going Green initiative really got started with the release of this first report in the Director's Bulletin in 2009. And this report was titled DFG Going Green, Reducing Our Carbon Footprint. And so this was put together by kind of a group of informal staff that came together really interested in this topic. And so the report has information on ways that you can reduce energy use throughout the department, some ways to save energy in the office, save resources, save money, and also some recommendations for what individuals can do in the workplace to reduce their carbon footprint.
So after this came out, the director received really just a flood of emails from staff that were interested and said, this is great information, we want to know more. You know, what can we do now? What are our marching orders? So the director, in response, in early 2010, released a second bulletin that created a Going Green working group, which we know as the Going Green team. So the Going Green team was originally tasked with going to that original report and identifying the things that we could do immediately, those near-term actions we could take to increase our sustainability, and then also trying to create a long-term sustainability vision for the department. So that team started out really as just a few people, kind of a formalized group that put together the original report. And it has grown to, I think, around 150 people at any one time over the last several years. And so this group has really been, they've really been a driver, a real impetus for getting these actions started at the department and keeping us moving forward. So as I mentioned, that team was tasked with going back to that original report and identifying the actions that we could take today, identifying which actions would require, policy changes or additional funding, and then which actions could be part of a longer-term sustainability vision. So what they did was come together and release a second report called DFG Going Green, Next Steps Towards Sustainability. And so that report, I'm just breaking equipment up here at the podium. All right, so that sustainability report did lay out that broader vision for the department. It laid out some additional actions for the director to consider, talked about what we were already doing, and then also made some recommendations for what we could do, but also provided a sampling of individual staff highlights, and I'll actually be talking about a few of those later in the presentation. So actually the most important thing to come out of this report was that the director released a new bulletin. And that bulletin identified guidelines for actions that everyone could take immediately in the workplace. So there were some recommendations around ways to reduce paper use, recommendations related to transportation, energy conservation and efficiency, reducing water use, green meetings, holding WebEx meetings, and recycling. So this was really important because it came out and it answered that call from staff about what can we do now, and it showed that there's a lot of support from our executive leadership in really starting to take these actions in the workplace. So in light of all this work that the Growing Green team has done, they recently won a DFG Employee Excellence Award, and this is a snapshot of a couple of the members of that core working group with Kevin Hunting and Chuck Bonham receiving their award at a ceremony last year. And again, they have really accomplished a lot over the last few years. They're currently thinking about a sustainability policy for the department and what that might look like. And so we're really just excited to see what they have in store and where they go in the future. All right, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about DFW bikes. So this initiative is something that, after those guidelines came out, we had a lot of staff that kind of stepped up and took on their own initiatives that they were interested in, and DFW Bikes was one of those. So this DFW Bikes Committee was, again, a small group of staff that got kind of a grassroots start. And it was several people that were really interested in trying to promote the biking community and commuting at the department and really help to create a healthy work environment. They've done a lot of research in trying to incentivize bicycle commuting to work, and really they're just trying to serve as kind of a support system for this community at the department. So they have created an online discussion forum. It's an internal discussion forum that's hosted on our intranet, and it's a place where staff can go and ask questions, exchange ideas, thoughts, and comments. And they also put together a DFW Bikes website. And this is a screenshot of their website. It lives on our Going Green webpage. And really they just wanted to bring some resources together related to, let's say, there's biking laws and regulations, commuter tips, and serve as a resource for our staff and some of our partners in the public. So where are they now? The DFW Bikes Committee is currently working on a bike survey. And this is a pilot survey for staff in the Sacramento area. And they're trying to find out, how many people are biking, how often, what motivates them to bike, what are their ideal bike storage options at the office. And this is also, the survey is also meant to gauge interest, staff's interest in a possible ride share program or like a bike pool at the office. So what they're hoping to do is they will compile all this information, analyze it, and then be able to make some recommendations to the director about ways that we can try to really incentivize and really encourage more people to either ride in to work more often or to start riding in if they don't already. So they are working on this right now, and I know that they'd appreciate any sort of help. Anyone that's interested in getting involved in the DFW Bikes Committee, let me know. I can put you in contact with that group, and they'll be sifting through those results here pretty soon. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about kind of what we're actually doing at the department, some of the actions that we're taking to reduce our carbon footprint, and also to track what we've been doing over the last few years. So we at the department are very supportive of the governor's aggressive actions to put the state on a path towards greater sustainability. And the governor has recently released two different executive orders. There's B-1812, which is related to green building practices, energy conservation, and water use. And there's B-16-2012, which is aimed at increasing the number of zero-emission, or the percentage of zero-emission vehicles in our state vehicle fleet. So we've got staff currently from our business management branch, our IT branch, and our engineering branch that are working on really making great steps towards implementing these different executive orders. So I'm going to give you just kind of a brief overview of some of their activities, but if you want to find out, more detail, dig in a little bit deeper, let me know, and I can put you in touch with some of the folks that are working on these different issues. But for example, more specifically, the business management branch is working with the Department of General Services to try and identify some large-scale opportunities across the state for how we can reduce our energy and water use. They're also working with IT to automate the collection of water information, and so that we have a baseline against which we can measure the effectiveness of the actions we're taking to implement these executive orders. The engineering branch is also working to try and incorporate this B-16-2012 into their fleet planning and purchasing where appropriate. We're also taking steps to try and work to track our emissions reduction and our energy use. And specifically, staff in our business management branch have been collecting information on vehicle fuel usage, bulk fuel purchases, electricity consumption, utility usage. And what they've done with that data is they were able to create a baseline in 2008, and again, they're able to measure against that how our energy use has changed over the last several years. So for example, in 2010, which I think was the most recent data we had at this time, they reported a reduction in our energy use intensity of 7.3%. So we're continuing to track and collect that information and hope to see a continued reduction in our energy use. And then real briefly, we are undertaking different activities to reduce our paper use at the department and save energy. Our IT branch is in the middle of migrating the department from Windows XP to Windows 7. And in doing so, they're really conscious about making sure that the settings on all of our computers are at energy saving settings to be more efficient across the state. We're also undertaking some actions to reduce paper consumption by converting paper forms to an electronic format, and that's the topic of Crilly's talk, so I'm going to leave all the details to Crilly. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about some individual staff activities, things that staff are doing out in the regions, out in their offices to reduce their carbon footprint in the workplace. And these are all examples that came out of that 2011 report that people submitted to us. We said, what's going on out there, basically, what's happening? And so these are the things that they told us that they were working on. So for example, in Region 1, they formed a climate committee where they can talk about different climate change issues, and that could include mitigation and sustainability. In Region 2, they started their own recycling program in one of their offices, and that, they're recycling everything from bottles, ink cartridges, dead batteries. Region 3 reported that they are in the sustainability mindset, and that the majority of their staff are really, habitually, they're just actively thinking about how they can reduce their carbon footprint in the workplace. And so they're doing things like, we'll hold this meeting over the phone or in WebEx versus in person. If we do have to travel to a meeting in person, let's carpool. It's the small things that really add up over time. In Region 4, they reported that they were trying to optimize their energy use in a number of different ways. I think that one of the examples they gave was regularly monitoring the thermostats in their office to make sure they're on the most energy efficient setting. Region 5 was reducing paper and toner use, and they had the support of their regional manager and their IT staff. In Region 6, some of the HABCON staff and their bishop office were requesting that anytime the counties or cities send them environmental documents, that they do so on discs in electronic format rather than the paper versions. And in their Ontario office, there was one person that was taking the recycling from the whole office and taking it to a recycling facility. And I think that they were also hoping to start a recycling program in that office as well. And then the business management branch has a staff of around 22, and they started their own kitchen composting experiment. And this was really intended to, I think, kind of raise awareness about waste management in the office. So these different examples and others we have highlighted on our Sustainability Superstars webpage. And this is something that we just recently created to really try to highlight a lot of these activities and raise awareness. You know, these things are happening and a lot of staff are taking them on themselves. So if you or someone you know is a Sustainability Superstar, please let us know. We want to keep this page up to date and keep it fresh and let our partners in the public know what we're doing at the department. So what's next for the Going Green initiative? It's really up to you. A lot of these examples that I've shared with you got started because there was just one person who thought they were important and one person who was willing to take the steps to make them happen. The Going Green initiative really started, it really has been, and it will continue to be completely employee-driven. And so we want to hear what your thoughts are on this topic. We've got another discussion forum called the Climate and Sustainability Roundtable, where you can go in, participate, let us know what's important to you, share your ideas, and help keep this Going Green initiative alive and help keep our momentum going forward and help us to reduce our carbon footprint at the department. So that's where I'll end. Feel free to get in touch with me if you want more information on anything that I've talked about today, or if you want to be plugged into the Going Green team or the DFW Bikes Committee. And with that, I will pass over to Crilly.
So quite an audience today. Anyway, there's never going to be a paperless office, at least not in my lifetime. And yet that's absolutely no reason at all to get discouraged, because each of us, as we've just learned from Whitney, has the ability to take things into our own hands and make small efforts to improve the sustainability of the department. And I'm going to talk about a small effort. It's growing, so hopefully at some point it's going to become a big effort. But you always have to start small, and that's a fine place to start. We took on the migration of some of our department's paper forms to electronic format. The reason is pretty obvious. I mean, there isn't anybody in this room who hasn't had to fill out many, many forms over your life at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it's a hassle. It's inefficient in time. It's wasteful in resources. It costs a lot of money. It's slow. There's no accountability and no security. It gets the job done, but it doesn't get a job done particularly well. The process right now for filling out a paper form, it's something straight out of Kafka. I mean, you fill out the form. First you have to find it somewhere on our intranet, hopefully. And there's forms, of course, there's hundreds of them, so you have to search. And then you find the form that you want, and you bring it up on your computer monitor, and you think, an electronic form. Sorry, not an electronic form. It's a fill and print form, usually in PDF format, and you fill it out. But there's no ability to do anything other than fill it out and print it. So you fill it out, you print it, and then you make a copy for yourself, and you stick it in your file. And then you walk it over to your supervisor, or put it in the mail to your supervisor, and they sign it, and they make a copy for themselves, and then they move it on. After the supervisor signs the form, it then has to go to wherever its final destination might be, and then they receive it, and they sign it and stamp it in, and then they file it and make another copy. And I mean, you can see it's a tedious process, it's a lengthy process, and it's a very inefficient process. And that's just if everything goes well. That's if it doesn't get lost in the mail. That's if it doesn't get, fall behind somebody's desk. That's if it doesn't get coffee spilled on it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in the best of cases, it's an inefficient process. In the worst of cases, it's a fail. Very time-consuming. It can take days, sometimes weeks, to process an individual form, depending on how many people have to see it, make copies of it, sign it, and move it along. It's expensive. I mean, if you think about it, it's not just the cost of the paper, although I just learned that DWR spent $750,000 on printer paper last year. So it adds up. But it's also toner cartridges and printer maintenance. I mean, the more you use a printer, the faster it wears out. The sooner you have to replace it, and they're not expensive. And toner cartridges, my God, those are really expensive. And then you have to schlep it from place to place. Maybe you put postage on an envelope or interoffice mail or whatever, but then, you've got the cost of postage or the cost of interoffice mail, gasoline, et cetera. And then all these different copies of this form are sitting in filing cabinets or on piles on people's desks everywhere, and they add up. I mean, the accounting branch, they have warehouses filled with paper forms, copies of paper forms. Not only is their whole office filled with them, but off-site storage as well. And it's impossible to track these things. I mean, you have to develop these entire manual processes or semi-automated processes just to record when a form comes into your office and who got it and who signed it and who moved it along. And in a lot of cases, that's not even done, so there's just no accountability at all. So what's the alternative? Well, as a member of the Green Team, we all had to put our thinking caps on and try to figure out how are we going to address some of these problems. And we have the tools. We have them right on our desktops. We don't have to buy anything. We don't have to go anywhere. We have it all. The idea is to recognize that we have the ability to solve these problems and then come up with procedures to do it. And so that's what we did. We decided we were going to take some forms and we were going to convert them to electronic format. That means not only filling out the form online, but affixing a digital signature to that form, so you don't have to print out a copy at all. You just digitally sign it, and then you save it, and then you email it as an attachment to whomever gets it next, and the next person does the same thing. They affix their digital signature and save a local copy on their hard drive or a network share if they need to, and then move it on to the next person. We realized that we didn't have any money to spend on this project, so we wanted to make use of existing technologies and our existing infrastructure. And if you look at our image, especially our new image on our PCs, we have an incredible array of tools and technologies available to us. Adobe Acrobat, that in our old image everyone had on their desktop. In our new image, a lot of people do. We have, I think, over 500 licenses in the department altogether that people are using, but we're also investigating cheaper alternatives to Acrobat Professional. But even the free Acrobat Reader version, the current version is version 11, has just amazing capabilities that enable the processing of electronic forms and digital signatures. We have network shares that can be made secure so that only designated people can access them. So the ability to store these digitally signed documents and forms securely is already available to all of us. And this entire process, by converting the paper forms to electronic format, allows us to save a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of hassle in processing these forms. So this is how it works. Compare this with how it used to work. Just fill out the form, digitally sign it, save it, send it off as an attachment to the next person, and it goes through the chain until it gets to the last person. It gets saved to a secure network share, and you're done. Well, yeah. So when we decided to actually implement this project, we realized that there were some hidden gotchas. So, for example, the digital signatures that we have available to us in Adobe Acrobat and Microsoft Word are not secure, third-party, trusted digital certificates. So we decided that we would only use this process for forms that stayed entirely within the department. So any form that has to go to DGS or has to go to DOF or SCO, we decided we weren't going to use those forms, at least at this point. Maybe at sometime in the future, we'll invest in a third-party trusted digital certificate, but for right now, we're going to use the internally generated certificates. We wanted to choose some good form candidates to start with, sort of as a proof of concept. We didn't want to say, okay, we're going to identify all of the 300 or 400 or 500 forms in this department and convert them all. Instead, we decided to choose some candidates that were sort of low-hanging fruit. And so we carefully selected some forms that were owned by our business management branch. We had 2 people from business management branch on our team, and they were willing to go through all of their forms and identify forms that stayed within the department. We also wanted to choose forms that did not contain any confidential data, because you don't want to start with forms like that. You want to make sure that everything is working properly with forms that contain data that really isn't going to jeopardize anybody's confidentiality or sensitivity. Then we had to go to our legal department and convince them that converting to digital signatures was fine. You know, we have this mindset, and a lot of our efforts to try to improve the sustainability in this department come up against the way we've always done it. They come up with limitations that aren't necessarily applicable, but until you actually research and investigate, it's easy to believe that a digital signature isn't as good as a wet paper signature, that a document that's signed digitally doesn't have the force of law behind it the way a wet signature does. But what we found out is that, in fact, there is legislation that's been passed in the state of California that makes digital signatures fully legally acceptable. And so we researched this, and we worked with a friend of mine who is a private consultant. He came in and supported our team's effort without any charge to the department, just as a favor to me. And he'd already implemented similar projects in a couple of other state agencies, and so he's very familiar with the territory. So we decided to start small, start with very carefully selected forms, and yet with a full expectation that once it caught on, the scope of this project would expand. So these are some of the requirements that we came up with for choosing the forms that we began with. We wanted it to be a PDF form. We wanted it to be a form that stayed within the department for its entire life cycle. Obviously, it had to be a form that was able to be signed electronically. We had to use forms that our legal department told us that they would trust our internally generated digital signatures. It had to be able to be routed electronically throughout the department, and so email attachments work just fine for these kind of forms. We needed to be able to store the final form in a secure location, and the network share that we identified worked fine for that. And we wanted to make sure that the final electronic process for dealing with this form was faster and more efficient than the current manual process. That was pretty easy to do. This is the legal support behind moving to digital signatures. California Government Code Section 16.5. You can read it for yourself, but it makes it clear that digital signatures have the full weight of wet signatures under California law. So what are the technologies that we already had as a department that we could bring to bear on converting these forms from paper to electronic format? We needed a form design tool, and there's a form design tool that comes with Adobe Acrobat Professional called Lifecycle Form Designer ES. We needed a form response tool. In other words, the person creating the form needed more technology than the person simply signing the form or filling out the form. So once the form was created, we found out that the current version of Adobe Reader would do everything that we need to do to process these forms. The secure digital certificate is also part of the Adobe Acrobat Professional package. The secure repository, as I mentioned, we have on our network shares, and the form distribution methodology, email attachment. So you can see this is not high tech. This is something that any state agency should be able to do fairly easily. Some of the assumptions that we made in choosing our forms, that there's going to be a person or a group of people who are going to be tasked with creating the electronic forms. And fortunately, we had a couple of people on the team that were eager to learn some new skills, and they took that part of the project on. We got the digital certificate from our Adobe Acrobat Professional. We downloaded the latest version of Reader, which is now part of our current image, but at the time, we needed to upgrade. And then we had to create some instructions because, most of the people in the department, even though they had the tool to create a digital signature, had never done so. And so they needed some instructions step by step to do it. And it's actually very, very simple and straightforward using the wizard that comes within Adobe Acrobat. So what we did is we sent our business management branch team members out to examine all of their forms. And of course, as I said before, to eliminate anything that had to leave the department, to eliminate anything that contained sensitive or confidential information. They rated them as being internal only, fill and print, already in Adobe format, signature required. Obviously, we wanted a form that required a signature, otherwise we couldn't prove that we could do it with digital signatures. And then we also wanted forms that had to be digitally approved. And so we found a few good candidates, and then we rolled up our sleeves and got busy. We selected the final form candidates, created the all-electronic version of those forms. We experimented with different kinds of digital signatures. There's some that you can store as a file on your computer or on a network drive, and then there's others that are stored in the Windows registry. We had to test the forms, send them back and forth to each other and approve each other's forms to make sure that we could all do it. Then we had to create the instructions, the user documentation. We put the forms up on our intranet in a special place that contained only the forms that we were converting. And then we had to get executive behind the effort. And Chuck sent out an email to everyone in the department encouraging everyone to use the electronic versions of the forms, and we really appreciated that support. And then, of course, we had to be available when people called with questions. So we were. And they called, and we helped them, and it went well. What we discovered, and this was very cool, is that once we got the project started with our first 5 or 6 forms, all of a sudden people got interested, and they wanted their forms converted to electronic format. And Business Management Branch identified other forms of their own that they wanted to convert. Now, the Contracts Branch discovered a couple of forms that they wanted to convert as well. And so we did. We started working on some additional forms, and we added them to the intranet. We found that some of the forms that we originally created needed a couple of refinements, and so we made some updates to those forms. And then we did something kind of interesting. I called actually the manager of our Contracts Branch. I asked her how many of the forms were coming in electronic format and how many were coming in paper format now that we had the electronic version available. And she gave me some numbers, and it was clear that even though the electronic version was now available, people were still using the paper form. So she agreed to start refusing to accept the paper version of the forms anymore. And with that commitment on her part and the understanding by her staff of that commitment, it really helped push us along even further. It's really important to think outside the box when you're trying to turn the battleship. It's really easy to get frustrated and discouraged when you look at the scope of moving any organization to an entirely green direction. But there's no reason to get discouraged, because many people in this department have already shown convincingly that even little things can add up. And this department has made great strides already in decreasing its carbon footprint and moving towards sustainability. And this is, just one little contributor. So it stopped working. There we go. Here's some resources. I already mentioned California Government Code 16.5. California Code of Regulations, Title II, covers digital signatures as well. And then there's a link here to a white paper on the Adobe website that talks about using digital signatures within Adobe products. Just get in touch with me if you'd like me to send you this PowerPoint or the links. Thanks.
Aside from turning forms into PDFs that we can use with digital signatures and stuff, have we decided, try to work it away from forms altogether, like registration for classes you can do online? Are we ever going to get to the point where we can do our timesheets internally online?
It's funny that you should mention timesheets, because last week I worked with Andrew Felsenstein from the accounting branch to create a request in our IT catalog for electronic timesheet project in IT. And we've moved that request quickly through the queue, and he's now in the process of fleshing out a concept statement. Now, I'm encouraged about the possibility of moving in that direction. There was a time when we actually had begun to move in the direction of electronic timesheets, and we visited some other state agencies and saw what systems that they were using, and we were never able to identify anything that would actually work for our department. And then, all of a sudden, MyCalPays comes down the pike, the SCO, the 21st Century Project. And so any efforts to create electronic timesheets were put on hold because that system was ostensibly going to give us electronic timesheet capabilities. Now that that system has been taken offline, we may well be able to move forward again in that direction. I certainly hope so. it's a great candidate. If you had any idea what the accounting branch goes through every month to try to get those timesheets keyed into CalSTARS, you'd be amazed.
Well, I would just like to again personally thank Crilly and Whitney for giving this presentation. It has been an incredible pleasure to work with Crilly. He has been an incredible leader, very inspiring, and very committed to this issue on our Going Green team, and is really kind of part of the backbone of that work. So he has given a lot of time and energy, and you're doing great things for the department. And Whitney, what can I say about you, but you're just my right hand, so I couldn't function without you. So it's been great to sort of begin this Climate College lecture by focusing on staff, focusing on our sustainability initiative, and we hope that you will join us for the final lecture next month to focus on fish and wildlife testimonials from our staff, are walking the talk. So thank you very much for being here with us, and thank you for all of those who are on the WebEx, and we'll see you next month.